Everybody knows that all over the world, oceans are crowded with hideous, gigantic monsters. Also, lakes have their own monsters, Loch Ness Monster being perhaps the best known specimen. For some reason, the supernatural water creatures in Finnish folklore are not very big, mostly being maybe man-sized or sometimes even smaller. However, they are always mortally dangerous, especially to little children. And some of these creatures are dangerous in a more subtle way, as we can see in the following tale, where a love-hungry female water creature, Näkki, the guardian of the river, sets her eyes on a young man with fateful consequences. This young man should have been aware of the well-known old Finnish saying, "Don't fall in love with the water demon." 100 years ago, a young deacon, Anders Stenbeck, came to his appointed position in the parish of Vähäkyrö in western Finland. The vicarage of Vähäkyrö was right next to Kyrönjoki River, one of the longest and widest rivers in Finland. There was a traditional laundry place on the riverbank quite close to the vicarage, and in addition, in a distance, dictated by decency and modesty, places for swimming that were very popular with young people, as was the custom in those days when swimming suits were not even heard of in these parts of the world. One place was for boys and one for the girls. That summer was very hot, and especially the August days were stifling with late summer heat. Anders was very fond of swimming, but because of his clerical position, he was self-conscious about swimming when there were others present. Therefore, he liked to do his swimming alone at night, when he could have the swimming place all for himself. On one fateful August night, Anders walked the path to the riverbank, anticipating a cool swim in the Kyrönjoki River. Much to his surprise, he saw that this time he would not have the swimming place all for himself. There was a large rock in the glittering river stream, jutting up from the river. On the rock sat a beautiful, naked young woman, combing her long blonde hair. Summer night light seemed to envelop the woman in a soft glow. The woman was singing a song which Anders did not recognize, and also the words were in some strange language. Anders could not help but stare at the woman and tried in vain to look away. He could feel the blood rushing to his head, and he blushed furiously. He must have made a noise because the woman suddenly looked up and saw Anders. She did not look surprised at all, but smiled and said, "It is quite rude to stare, you know. If you want to swim, just hop in. I'm not going to bite." Anders blushed even more. He looked around, afraid that someone could see this scene, which had all the elements of a scandal, and which would make him a laughingstock of a county at the very least. But there was no one else around, he noticed. "Just turn around and walk back," he said to himself desperately. "And for God's sake, don't speak to her." But his feet were paralyzed, and a strange humming noise seemed to surround him. He took a trembling, reluctant step forward and asked, "Who are you? I haven't seen you before, and I have seen all the local people in the church, but not you." The woman smiled and said, "Of course you haven't seen me in a church. I can't come to the church. None of my family can. Anders was even more mystified. The strange humming noise seemed to cloud his thinking, and he kept on staring at the woman. He noticed that her teeth were sharp and long, and her eyes were all black, without any whites. "Why can't you come to the church? Does your father forbid you?" The woman laughed. "No, my father doesn't forbid me anything. He just can't stand Christianity. He lives far away in the sea, and I live here all by myself, looking after his domains." "His domains? What do you mean? And why do you live here all by yourself? And why haven't I seen you before?" The woman shrugged impatiently. "Too many questions. And just because you haven't seen me does not mean that I haven't seen you," the woman added, smiling mysteriously. "I have seen you here many times, swimming all by yourself. But enough talk now. Jump in." Surprised by her commanding tone, the young deacon started to take off his clothes. "Stop," he said to himself silently. "Don't jump in the water," he said desperately to himself, even as he was jumping into the water. Then he was in the water and everything changed. They started circling each other in the water, splashing water and whooping with delight and laughter. Anders realized he was in love with the woman and asked, "Where is your home? I want to see your home and meet your family. I am in love with you and I want to marry you." The young woman stopped laughing and was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at Anders with her huge black eyes and said, "You can come to my home and you can have me, but you have to tell me 3 times that you will be mine forever, and this oath cannot be undone." Anders laughed. "How strange you are. I will say anything you want." And then he said 3 times, "I will be yours forever." Immediately, the woman grabbed Anders firmly by the hand and started to dive to the bottom of the river. They dived and dived, deeper and deeper. "I did not realize that the river is so deep," Anders thought as they were sliding through the dark waters. He tried to pull himself loose, but her grip was firm. Just as Anders felt that his lungs would burst, he realized that he could breathe. They had swam and emerged into a dark cave which had air. He looked around and saw that the cave was huge. On the floor of the cave was the watery tunnel out of which they had come there. There was a strange glowing moss on the stone walls that gave the place an eerie illumination. "Welcome to your new home," she said, smiling with her sharp teeth. Anders looked around, horrified. There were piles of human bones everywhere, and the cave stank of mud. With a terrible cry, he realized where he was. You are Näkki, the evil demon of the river. You steal small children from the banks of the river and eat them up, and you tempt people to drown themselves in the river." The woman laughed. "Yes, that is true. And now you belong to me. You are mine alone." And so it came to pass that the young deacon was captured by the guardian of the river. August turned into November, and quite soon it was winter. The woman fed Anders raw fish and kept close watch on him. When she went away on her hunting trips, she tied Anders tightly in rusted chains. And she also tied Anders up on Sunday mornings when the sound of the church bells rendered her unconscious. She told him stories of her people who lived in lakes and rivers all over the world. Having hidden from humans for such a long time that they had become the stuff of legend and nightmares. She said, "It is my duty to be the guardian of this river and protect those who live in it. We must protect the river from humans, but there are more and more of your kind here. Once we were worshipped as gods, but now we are just feared. I have lived for thousands of years, and I fear the end is near for my kind. But I felt lonely, and that is why I brought you here to be my companion." The winter brought ice to the river, and they could hear whenever somebody would walk on the ice. And when someone would hack a hole in the ice, they had to cover their ears, for the sound was painfully deafening. One spring morning, the Sunday church bells started booming in the cave, and the woman lost her consciousness. Anders realized that she had not tied him up in chains. Was this forgetfulness, or was this a sign of trust and love? He did not stay to ponder these questions, but dived into the tunnel and began swimming furiously. He swam, and he came to the surface of the river. There were local people on the riverbank, setting the first fishing nets of the spring in the river. Anders swam towards them in the cold water and waved his hand and tried to shout. The people noticed him and were horrified at the sight of a long-haired, naked man climbing out of the water, babbling some wild story of water demons and captivity. At first they thought he was some kind of maniac who was claiming to be the lost deacon of the county. But when they took the shivering, wild-eyed man to the police, his identity was confirmed. Summer came, and little by little Anders recovered, at least physically. His superiors decided that he was well enough to take up his position as a deacon. But each night he would stand in the window of the vicarage and stare at the river. Each night he would walk to the swimming place and watch the water, both hopeful and fearful that he would see the woman there again. He never saw her again. Things did not get any better. During sermons, Anders would often cry aloud in the church and started telling stories about the lady in the river who was the love of his life. People started to whisper about the mad deacon. It was decided that he was unable to carry out his duties as a deacon and was resigned. He lived the rest of his brief life in poverty, a hollow shell of a man, out of place in this world. When autumn came, he wandered the riverbanks and shouted and pleaded for the river demon to come and take him back to her home. Nobody answered. And then, one cold December morning, they found his body, covered in rags and frozen to death. With his last strength, he had tried to claw his way through the ice to the depths of the river.